Hey everybody, welcome to the Pro Edge Podcast. Thanks for joining us. My daughters Samantha and Alex are helping us with the intro today. Today we had on Andrew Cousins, author of A Failed State. He worked for JSOC, Joint Special Operations, as a federale in Afghanistan. So we had a really interesting conversation, a lot of cool things. Girls, what exactly are you doing?
ASMR.
Yeah.
It's a trend.
Daddy.
What's it trending? What are you doing
Eating
in that?
raw honeycomb.
Raw honeycomb. That's a trend now
Yes.
too?
Yes.
Is that like an ASMR thing?
Yes.
They just eat raw honeycomb and
What?
it's just the noise, the smack, or what? What is it?
I don't know.
And sometimes people do like this while
people
they're
do-
talking,
people
and they
do-
have to whisper in the mic. And
Praise-
sometimes they make this sound while they're talking or eating. Like the
so
snacks.
awkward.
It's funny.
Interesting. Well, you guys are goofy. So let me get through my sponsorship here. And now with the girls on, I got to watch my language. So first off, I'd like to thank Jack's Nutrition. If you guys need some supplements, get on down to Jack's and get jacked. They're on Eagle and U-Stick. Steve and Dustin. Those guys know what they're doing. They've also got Met Meals down there. Dustin can hook you up. That's pre-cooked meals. He's a graduate of culinary arts, was a cook in the Coast Guard. Does all your macros, have choices, best meal prep program if you're looking to lose weight, cut weight, bulk, build muscle, dance and hip-hop, whatever you're looking to do. Also, a shout-out to Muse Tattoo down on Main Street. If you guys are looking for ink, go see Cody down there. Cleanest shop in the spot. Great work. I just can't say enough good things about Muse Tattoo. What's so funny over there, Sam?
I think I can hear her doing lip smacks like
No, I'm not. You were just showing.
what? Well, yeah, because I'm showing an example of what you're doing.
So,
Where did you guys learn how to do that?
YouTube. Okay, so yeah.
YouTube.
Well, we didn't learn how to. We always do it.
This is how you do like the lip smack things that Alex was blaming me on.
What? It wasn't me.
That's
You
what
two
they do
are
on
hilarious. I think Sam's definitely likes the spotlight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Jeez.
Definitely the more
You get it, girl.
energetic of the two.
Yeah, you are hilarious.
A
So, folks, again, A Failed State by Andrew Cousins. I'd like to thank my beautiful introduction guests, Miss Alexandria Kate Jeffries and Miss Samantha May Jeffries. Ladies, you look lovely as always.
Thank you.
You look lovely as always. Be sure to clean your room and brush your teeth.
We will.
Now get on up out my studio, girls. Come on now.
Seriously?
We want to stay on.
We're done. All right, folks, we're live. Not really.
No,
With
we are though.
my new friend Andrew Cousins, author of A Failed State. Let me get this up here, angle on it.
There you
So
go.
that's how often I do that. So Andrew, I was stoked to. Funny how we kind of met and the timing on it. With the ISIS flag on the front of your book, your experience with Joint Special Operations Command is a unique one in itself. And I think especially just like my misconception when I met you, and I've even been part of that community
Right.
as far as who's who and what does what. And so I was excited to have you on and talk about your book, A Failed State by Andrew E. Cousins. And can this be searched on Amazon?
It can. Usually the author's name works a little better than the title because there's a couple conflated similar titles. But yeah.
Yeah,
it's-
that's A Failed State I could see coming up for like
Yeah.
North Korea or
yeah,
whatever.
right.
Libya.
It's on Amazon.
California.
California. you know.
Sorry, California.
Amazon,
it's only-
iTunes, and Sony and Barnes. Actually, if that's, I was surprised Barnes and Noble was still around, but I guess they're still kicking. So.
Audible.
Audible's coming. I wanted to kind of get the first launch on obviously on hardcover for the friends, family, and some other networks that are interested. And I wanted to, of course, get the ebook blasted out first. But
Right on.
what's next? Yeah, for sure.
Cool. So let's just get right down into it.
You bet.
Paint the picture for me, where you come from, how you got into said federal agency, the environment of the country, when said catastrophic event happens. We were both in different federal versions at the time.
Correct. Yep.
But, same time period, just in how it led up to the book, some of the experiences you had to why you wrote the book and the meaning of the book.
Yeah, you bet. Unfortunately, a lot of the information, as you well know, we talked about a little bit, is still classified. Active clearance right now, which probably within the end of the 5-year term, which is in 4 years from now, will expire. I'll probably be a little bit at a more liberty to say a few more things. But yeah, just a multi-theater wide support system for the door kickers, the guys in special mission units that kick the doors and grab the bad guys and do what they will, depending upon their mission profile. But just collecting intel and or helping to collect intel and safeguard those guys and keep those guys safe while they're just getting what they need and feeding it to the guys that do the dirty work. So.
Okay, and so what federal agency did you work for?
So the federal agency in relation to the mission at hand obviously stays off the lips, but started with a couple of different ones. They merged under Homeland Security, but obviously CBP is a big one. And that was a different mission, but the agency that I actually got to work with temporarily, because everybody's kind of brought together under that umbrella, is one that hardly anybody has ever heard of, and that's the NSSE. And it's essentially a task force for large venues, presidential elections, Olympic venues,
Summits.
what have you. Correct. And they
G8 World Summit.
exactly, and that was
I was part of that in 2004.
yes, you were. Yep. And
Brunswick, Georgia.
Yep. So
St. Simon's Island. Yep.
So exactly.
I was in the
what
Coast
mean.
Guard down there.
That's right. And that comes together, especially post 9/11.
If I could interrupt you
Yeah.
real quick, I just wanted to backtrack so we can kind of educate the listeners on what we're talking about here. There's different versions of special forces. Obviously, each branch has their own version, and what's the best way to describe this? So Joint Special Operations Command is a combined command group of our special operations and different agencies we have as a country that all work together in combination to do things. And so JSOC usually, this is like your Tier 1 operators. There's year requirements to be an operator in J1. However, that community has, just like any other special forces group or any other Army group or what have you, it has support personnel. So those special forces guys that are actually operators, your Green Berets, your pararescuemen, your combat controllers, your SEALs, Delta, your Marine Recon, those guys a lot of times have to have support getting to and from and such like that. And Andrew's job was in that realm as a personal security detachment commander. So he basically was, you could, in layman's term, you're a taxi driver, but he was a taxi driver for the world's best that were conducting pretty intense missions in Afghanistan. So just to paint that picture, so Joint Special Operations Command, it's not uncommon to have different special forces groups and federal agencies working together as one out on mission. The dynamics of that can change vastly, but for the most part, that's what Joint Special Operations is. It basically brings everyone's intel together in one spot. Is a better way to put it.
Hey, that's a long-winded but accurate
Yeah.
portrayal of how it is. But yeah, I mean, you hit it on the head. I mean, I did the grunt work just like a lot of guys. as a contractor, security, obviously medical. We had a aircraft search and rescue package in case an aircraft went down. But it sounds glamorous, but like as you know, Conrad, that it's 90% boredom and maybe 10% terror. So
Yeah.
a lot of time on the Xbox, a lot of time phoning home or on the computer, buying stuff on Amazon that make you happy while you're downrange. But yeah, definitely saw the cool stuff and got to fraternize with the cool guys. But
Yeah, and it's definitely a different community.
yeah,
I try to describe it like coming from a conventional unit in the Army where everything's dog shit and you're just treated like dog shit, and you go to like that community and they're like, welcome.
yeah.
You're like, what?
Definitely silent professionals. Great guys that'll shake your hand and not give you attitude. I mean, I know there's inter branch rivalry and stuff like that, but I think
There's so much ego when it goes on. I have a funny story too. So we're Idaho National Guardsmen, but like there was a reason. I think his name was Senior. I shouldn't say it. He was a SEAL team guy. He was a senior chief. He was in charge of us at one point, and then there was a sergeant major that was a Delta Force guy that was in charge of us at another point. He was a character. But the one that was a Navy guy said that they liked the guardsmen because we were civilians, and so we thought a little bit more asymmetrical.
Yes.
And we had different skills.
Yes.
Like we weren't just so like...
yeah.
But anyway, I think we're about 8 months in country, and by this time my platoon alone, I think it ran over 600 missions. My gun truck was over 300, and that's in and around Baghdad in a 2-truck set at high speeds. And so some Rangers showed up on our JSOC base, and my platoon sergeant, being the outstanding Idahoan that he is, goes, "Hey, Sergeant Jeffries, you're my top guy. Go out there and see if they want any route recon with us. We'll set up a meeting, or if they want us to go out on with them, you guys can kind of show them some of the pockets, some of the choke points, and blah, 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 blah." And so naturally I went out there and like they kind of laughed at me. Those guys did. And then later that night they got lost. And guess who they had to call? Fucking. Anyway,
because
I
guys
just think
on the
it's
ground longer know
those weekend
yeah.
warriors, buddy. We were just out there chewing hay, like,
Yeah.
"Oh, we'll go get some Rangers tonight, boys. They got lost out there in Baghdad." Like, just a funny story of ego.
Indeed.
Like, all I was trying to do is help you guys, man. We're not all knuckle dragging,
Right.
tards just because we're in the guard. Anyway, so yeah, interesting dynamic with JSOC and the different variables you see. So the book, what's the overall message you think you want with the book? And I think I know. I already know the answer to this,
Yeah.
but if you could describe it to our listeners on what this book, if they read it, what can it inspire out of them as far as knowledge and inspiration, maybe.
Yeah. So, and again, we talked at length about this quite a bit, but I was obviously compelled to write fiction due to the restrictions I had on a nonfiction
Correct.
Autobiography that was met with a lot of resistance, and understandably so. Even if I generalize things that they love to redact. So the fictional book, I was able to take some liberties. The main character, whose name in the book is Damian Collins, is an amalgamation of me and 2 other guys, and I used those 2 other guys because a large percentage of us had difficulties with our relationships back at home, and everybody always says in the rear. A lot of civilians will say in the rear, and so I have to explain. That means
Not butt sex relationship, people.
Yeah, because you hear that a lot. That a lot as even as a contractor. But really big difficulties maintaining the sanctity of their marriages. Going through divorce proceedings, dealing with custody battles for children, just stuff that pulls at the heartstrings. And I was really adamant about infusing all that into the main character because I wanted that character, despite all the cool stuff that he did in the book and got to see and got to partake in, to be as real as possible, and really struggle with those two missions, the home life and the life downrange. So
yeah, and I think there's a little bit of a misconception with kind of warriors in general. I think a lot of times when we look at war or combat, first off, I was watching something the other night I watch stuff every night on World War II. I geek out on that stuff. But, like, for someone to put their mindset from this country, even to be in Baghdad and seeing a kid beg for food out on a freeway, essentially, when they're no older than a toddler. And then the type of things that are saw in war is so irrelevant to what we really see as Americans. It's so hard to wrap our minds around. And what we forget a lot of times is not only are our warriors experiencing that, but fuck, these guys are humans.
Yeah, absolutely.
They've got wives, they've got their sons, their daughters, their uncles, and same with the women in our armed forces. And when it comes to marriage, the stats in this country are horrific alone. But when you add on the military lifestyle, it doesn't matter if you're active guard reservist, if you're a contractor,
absolutely,
if you're a full-on, SEAL Team 6 or Army Ranger or Coast Guardsman, or it doesn't matter. You can measure that stress is going to be higher. It has to be, because you're putting in some major factors in there that affect relationships. One, time away from each other.
Yep.
And that's also going to affect financials, because people's emotions and there's just this big organism that is our relationships, and as servicemen and women, we really need to watch that and figure out a way to try to help better that organism, because right now it's Fucksville.
It is.
I mean,
It's-
show me
it's-
a soldier
it is.
that's deployed, and I'll show you one that's been involved in a failed marriage.
Yep.
There's cases out there that aren't that case, but I mean,
they're the minority.
It's severely hard on families.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's just real, and guys struggle with it, and it takes a incredibly special woman to understand, the tug of war inside these guys, that they're trying to. A lot of the guys that I referred to that were inspiration were ex-Marines, so they were in the Marine Corps, not ex-Marines. You can't say that. Former Marines, especially on the Marine Corps birthday, you got to be careful. But former Marines that obviously were deployed quite a bit throughout their early parts of their marriage, and now they're deployed again. Generally 8 months out of the year with this organization, and gone all the time, sometimes out of communication completely, depending upon the area of operations. I was going to say AO, but you got to be careful with those acronyms.
I'll catch you if you catch me.
So these guys were just going from deployments, in service to more deployments and more deployments, and the guys love the mission. I'm sure you can attest. It's hard to get out. And that's why they're back in with this organization doing what they're doing.
Well, and I think a lot of people forget, it's easy to look at an American soldier or anyone that's serving their country and look at them as what you will, as just a war figure or what have you. I think people forget, a lot of times they forget the patriotism that goes along with being a soldier, and the good that you actually can see effect, and some of the good things that soldiers do that I experienced in Iraq, seeing real people that were real hungry get help and stuff like that, and putting real bad people, getting them off the and like I said, in this country they don't have a concept of what real bad people are. We hear about it in the news every once in a while. There's this mass murder or something like. The guys over in Iraq and Afghanistan and what was happening with, we're talking fucking bad dudes that have no sympathy for women, children, minority, they were killers. And the concept of that, it's just hard for the American people, I think, to relate to it. But for those of us that have been over there, it's a little greater than that. And you know, there's a lot of pride that goes into what we do, and that's because, you know, oftentimes it's bigger than us in the media and stuff like that. It's the war is this. It's about oil. It's about money. Okay, that's all good and great, but as foot soldiers, what are we? We're just the guys on the ground trying to do American shit. And, you know, Americans have always been very good with people. You know, I never saw any of my guys do anything bad, but I did see a lot of good come from. I saw them risk their own lives to give food to kids against my fucking orders. I about lost my shit. But, like, you know, that type of situations. And you know, America needs to read stuff like this and try to understand that that's, you know, a lot of what goes on to this book is just it could be their kids. It was probably their grandfather. It was probably, and this information that can be drawn from this socially can help in a lot of different avenues. But like as an American society, we got to protect our warriors because they protect us. And this type of book, hopefully, it helps enlighten people on what soldiers do, what they sacrifice to actually be soldiers. And
a lot of stuff at home, man. You know, leaving a wake of a lot of difficulties. You know, obviously missing their children, missing their wives. It's just I try to make it as real as possible for the readers to give them you know, an accurate portrayal of the fallout and the things that suffer the most. Obviously interspersed with quite a bit of action and some intrigue internationally. So and definitely some you know, some pretty detailed operations in there. But you know, even as an outsider looking in, you know, somebody can glean that from the story. Definitely the personal cost. And just, I think just the struggle to keep it all together, like you were saying, just to keep the whole package together and be a patriot.
Yeah, and the organism is weak.
Yeah.
Especially your family life when you get, because there's only certain things you can do. I kind of came to the philosophy, and I told some younger soldiers about this too, like, you know, going on a deployment, you've heard of guys on previous deployments whose old ladies cheated on them and did this and that. You about have to prep them for it.
Yeah.
You really, and if you're being logical with your guys and you're going to be honest with them, and that's what I did. I said, especially the young ones, like, okay, I know you got a lot of faith in this, and I was in my late 20s at the time. I was still considered pretty young. But, you know, those military guys were about 10 years superior than what a civilian would be as far as responsibilities in a lot of aspects.
Absolutely.
And so you take on a bigger role at a younger age. And one of my roles was, of course, all the guys in my squads. And, you know, prepping them for that mentally. Like, you know, women need attention, and you're going to be away from them a long time. And with social media now, attractive women, we've talked to them about it. Me and Tim have obviously been in relationships with attractive women that have Instagram accounts. They get constant pressure.
Yeah.
Constant.
Every day.
And it does not, I found this out. A lot of dudes out there, they don't give two swinging fucks if that chick's married.
No.
They're going to send shit.
Guys that wear
Don't plug a hole. That's their whole philosophy.
Yeah, dirt balls. And military guys have always been easy targets for that because they're gone.
Absolutely. And you know, it's...
and gals.
Yeah, and gals. True. Very true. And they're probably getting bombarded over there. But, you know, I obviously was deployed with guys that were on their third, fourth marriage, and some of these guys were in their late 30s.
Yeah.
You know, you don't want to be like, hey, man, I don't think you should marry that stripper when these guys are lonely. They, you know, obviously some of them want just companionship when they're back at home from a rigorous deployment schedule. And you can't fault them. You want it, you know, you want to hit them in the head and say, man, it's probably not a good idea. But, man, when somebody's on their fourth marriage, you know, they should know by now, right? They should have an idea of what's the best course of action for themselves. But, you know, I feel where the feels hit for me is just with the children, because I know kids love their dad or their mom if their mom's the one deployed. In this situation, in this particular contract, it was obviously all male because of the workload. But the kids, you know, a lot of these guys pride themselves on, hey, you know, I'm getting paid what what I feel I deserve now. My kids are taken care of. A college fund has started, what have you. But that's not all there is. You know that. There's a lot more to being a father than just making sure your kid's taken care of financially. And you know, when I came home, my kids were still pretty young at the time. You know, there was usually a warm-up period for that, and sometimes I was right back out the door a couple weeks later, just because of the demands of this particular contract. But yeah, makes for a good story. But at the same time, I just wanted to give the due diligence it deserves to keep it as real as possible, and that's what females get out of this story, because 75% of my readership is female,
yeah.
which blew me away, because I had no idea that would be the case, because they want to come to understand, you know, and
how you're thinking.
Correct.
Yeah, exactly.
An alpha male, but somebody also who is real and has feelings and you know, will tear up when they miss their family, just like any of us do.
Yeah.
Downrange, and they want to be able to come to wrap their heads around that and understand it. So I think that's why females in particular kind of graft onto that.
Yeah, it gives an inside perspective on that side of it, which is super important, because, like I said, at the end of the day, all those guys wearing the flag on their shoulder are just humans.
Yes.
And same with our female warriors. They're just people, kids and moms and uncles and dreams and goals and ambitions and
Indeed.
vices and everything else. And I think oftentimes we forget all that, and then you're putting them in an extraordinary circumstance on top of it.
Yeah.
And so, just one of those things. As society, we kind of have to at least be acknowledgeful of the type of stressors that we put on our servicemen and women, and especially, this is non-war related in a lot of ways. A lot of it is, and hopefully we can start finding answers.
Yeah. Well, I was probably, I averaged about the same as a bunch of guys. A lot of guys I still talk to, and probably in excess of 95% of them are still deploying. So I did 7.5 years, 21 deployments, an average of probably around 8 months interspersed throughout the year gone. And I know a lot of these guys, some of these guys are doing, you know, on their 11th, 12th, 13th year. We had the option at one point in one area of operations we were in that was out in the middle of nowhere to do as long as we wanted. And some guys put in a year and a half without any, without any decent communication home, intermittently talking to their wives or their kids, but definitely not over video, not over Skype at that particular location. And they were gone, consistently, and it, I got to see and hear about some difficulties that was really hard to, because at the time my marriage was pretty solid, and it just tore me apart. And then gradually I experienced what a lot of these guys did. My wife had difficulties with drinking and depression. Of course, my absences and the lack of communication made things considerably worse. And I wanted to make sure I infused A Failed State, the book, with all that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times we forget the psychological pressure that's put on these wives or husbands, even when the significant other deploys.
Yeah.
I think if I had to put money down, I would imagine it would go something like this. That type of deployment style with special forces groups and stuff like that is a rapid deployment style, quicker deployments. The conventional forces, like I was a part of, attached to JSOC, is more like you're going to be gone 12 months, 15 really with train up. And so we have this big dynamic in this time space where these women lose the person they love. They're on the anxiety that this person could be killed without them knowing. I would say there's a high probability at some point within those first 3 months they get on some kind of prescription drug. And so, just to kind of numb things up a little bit for them, make it easier. Yeah, the layers that happen from deployments are vast, and I think we often overlook the whole dynamic of the family. And far be it from us to know what the feeling is to have your son deploy. Like, I don't know that feeling. Right. The parents and the wives take on these huge burdens of having, their kid and their husband gone, and the stress from that, I can imagine, plays a toll on them psychologically. And I've just known too many military guys whose wives or ex-wives have gone down on prescription drugs and alcohol.
Yeah.
And I think the stories, I don't know, but they all kind of line up. You know what I mean? Oh, he
They
was
do.
deployed, and it just seems to make sense. And I wonder if we can start curbing those problems, because it affects the kids, it affects everyone.
It does. It's like at casting a stone in the pool, right? You get that ripple effect. But I did that in here too. And Damien, the main character's wife in the book, Anna, she struggles with alcohol, and obviously in his deployment seems to make it worse. And she does things she probably regrets in the morning, but it just makes it easier that evening. Nights are always the loneliest time to deal with any kind of grief or loss or distance or separation, and that's when people usually will kind of resort to that, and of course the character does, the character's wife does, and I'm not trying to make her two-dimensional within the storyline, but it's like I said, I'm just drawing from reality. There's another female in the book named Sarah, who is the secondary character on the team. His call sign's Loki, and she's a much stronger woman. They've known each other while he was in Ranger Battalion, and now he's with this organization, and she is very used to him being gone, very accepting of his sacrifice to the country, and that's rare. But I wanted to give both sides of that coin, because there are women out there that are like that are that are dutiful and that can hold their own with their man gone. So
Yeah, there are some, definitely some. I've Carol Shipley.
Yep.
Yeah.
Don's.
She's putting up with that. Because I understand what that lifestyle is for that many years.
Yeah.
Good God, that's got to be a good wife.
Right. I mean,
It's just the dynamics of it.
yeah, you gotta kind of maintain that balance, and if you see things aren't working out, and the contract we were on obviously gave the latitude for that. Some guys maybe need to spend longer at home and work on that marriage, and see counseling.
And there's something to be said about, I went through finding out about an affair when I was in country, and I was super cold to it because I had to be.
Yeah, well, you got to do your job.
And I think that there's got to be something bad about that, because for me, I took the latitude of what I was doing. Okay, here we're going out on the road. I've got these lives I'm in charge of. I'm the truck set commander. I've looked at the route. I've read the intel reports. Right. I think I've got the right way to go. You're always questioning yourself on a lot of different things, but you're carrying that weight with you that lives depend on decisions you make and stuff like that. And then you have all this going on in the background.
Yeah.
Well, you're not going to be able to be effective as a soldier, and you're going to get fucking people killed if you're not able to manage those. And some guys don't manage them as well, compartmentalize them, I guess would be a better way to put it. And some guys don't do it as well. And I think what happens for a lot of guys, especially in combat, is they know that if they don't put that shit aside and just forget about it, it's going to affect them, and they can get killed or they can get their brothers killed.
Yeah.
And so they don't ever fucking deal with it until it's too late. And so they've shelved it. Now they come home and it's like,
Absolutely.
It's only compounded,
like a powder keg. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just something.
And that's all you really can do in that situation too, because you can only talk on the phone and email so much in between missions, and that only does so much anyway. There's no way to get home and fix it. You know that.
Yeah.
And so all you can do is be like, I'm fucked.
Yep.
And I've got to do my job now to stay alive and keep my guys alive, and everything else with the family I'm going to figure out later.
Yeah.
And that's a lot to put on,
It
especially
is, man.
some of these dudes are so fucking young. I mean, I think about it, and it's like kids, man, kids.
They don't know how to manage that stress. And
Fuck, they're
that
still
anxiety.
trying to figure out how to balance a checkbook. You know what I mean?
Yeah. The guys that I worked
Figure
with.
out how not to crash their computers with that 10 terabytes of porn they got
Yeah,
going
well,
on.
that's pretty common. Just don't get caught at
Like-
the.
Don't get caught.
Yeah.
Like
No, but
young men and families.
Yeah, the guys on this
A lot of pressure.
guys on this contract were older. You think they'd be a little bit more squared away, but some, still have the same difficulties. Granted, they could probably process a little better, but like the characters in the book, in my book, dealing with anxiety. Some of them are dealing with PTSD. Your garden variety infidelity, stuff like that. I mean, it's in there because you can't have a story like we talked about of this tempo without having real effects on the characters and the things they juggle and deal with. So
Yeah.
I mean, you can have a kick-ass story that talks about the missions and how hard the guys are, because they are, man. They're great guys, but at the end of the day, everybody's got their cracks in their veneer and the things that they worry about and the things they fear. I mean, that's real, and that's what I try to do here.
Yeah, and especially as a soldier or what have you, you carry a lot of pride in being a dude that can handle shit.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
at
especially
that
when
level,
you're downrange.
Yeah, and at that level too, and just so to be failing in other aspects of life is super tough for those guys to accept. And losing a marriage, and I'm sure you could, far be it to guys can be. I don't care if they're the toughest fucking Delta Force operator in the world. Far be it for me to see how he'll react to a broken heart, because we all know that's the worst, right? And so, the dynamics that these guys have to go through, and it just plays the family stress plays such a significant role on the whole dynamic of the family, but the service member in general, and the other one I think is it's almost set up for failure in a sense.
It is, man.
And it's almost unavoidable, right? We have to have war, unfortunately. We've accepted that. We have to have our warriors. Is there a better way to do things? I don't know. Maybe we can figure that out. I'm sure that there's steps that can be taken in the right direction to help because I think, hear me out here, I think if we can solve some of the dynamics with the family at home and deployment cycles, we might inevitably curb some of the bad stuff that vets are doing,
Yep.
like self-murder and stuff like that. It's, like I said, this is an organism, a living, breathing thing, and we often look at it as it isn't. It's a machine. It's the military.
Right.
But this is an organism, and if we don't take care of it as we evolve, disease and cancer. I often describe military units like that. It's the same concept, and that's how you'd want anything. You'd want that organism running well defined.
Yeah.
You only want a couple guys that are negative Nancy's, right? Because if you get too many of those, that little inflammation becomes a cancer, and then that cancer runs through the ranks, and then you're not an effective unit.
No,
It's
absolutely.
like that. And so, I think from the outside looking in, these last two major conflicts have really opened our eyes to a problem as far as mental health with the military guys.
Yeah. Well, with perpetual wars,
Yeah.
obviously Afghanistan's a theater that's in the book, still going on. No sign of ending. I mean, they've made all kinds of plans to get out, but every time we do, the Taliban reemerges. In this case, I use ISIS and ISIS is functioning over there and actually forcing out some of the hardline Taliban guys because they're that much
More insane.
yeah. And locals think that that's the answer. Sometimes the ones that side with the the Islamic State and the Taliban, they think that's the answer. So you get support for that. But to get back to what you were saying, man, I just I work in my other job with the activity group with some guys from CAG, or what's commonly known as Delta Force, and I always imagine those guys as being super squared away. Well, when they got separated from the military, they're dealing with the same things me or some other civilians are dealing with now here in the rear. I mean, their anxiety and PTSD and nightmares and fits of anger. I mean, it's just like pick your poison, man. It affects everybody.
Yeah, and death is real when
Yeah.
you're in the military.
Yeah.
It's not something that's just discussed. It's not something. It's something at some point. Unless you're dumb, which can be the case. I've met some Air Force guys. No. Actually, little joke. I've got a buddy in the Air Guard, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm getting deployed again." I'm like, "Where are they sending you?" He's like, "Louisiana." Like, are you guys calling that deployment? Is that what you're telling the girls down at the bar?
Yeah.
Because I will fucking call you out if you're telling those chicks you're getting deployed when you're going to Louisiana.
What would they be going to Louisiana for?
Oh fuck, some training, and they call them deployments. Get the fuck out of here.
Air Force a little different, but
Yeah.
yeah. But Chow's always better on the Air Force Base. We had to go there for ordnance training and definitely enjoyed
They
the
do
chow.
get the best looking women too.
Yeah. You always look for the Air Force uniforms, and you know that the girls there are going to be, if it's on, especially if you're on a FOB and they're wearing Air Force uniforms, they're generally better looking.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to get flack for that because there are exceptions, but
Yeah, there are some exceptions. Marine girls are they look like they've been beat up by wild animals. No, I'm just kidding. That's the Navy.
yeah, I try to keep my eyes to myself most of the time, but geez, we went through some countries obviously and did some workups in some pretty outstanding cities, Dubai and some others that and I definitely got a huge taste of the and an aspect to look inwards as a civilian, looking into I guess the way things go for some of these special operations guys and stuff, and I respect the hell out of them. They're incredible, but everybody, like you said, suffers from that same plight of
and
being
then
human.
I think there's the point I was getting to before I got off on the Air Force being a joke. They're not. Was that death is real to? It's talked about operationally. It's if you're smart, and most guys are, or most guys they browbeat you so much you end up signing your will at some point.
Yes.
And that's what I think. In this context, you're dealing with guys that they're in an environment where death isn't necessarily celebrated, but it's very fucking relevant.
Yeah.
And then we wonder why these guys are icing themselves. And we gotta take special care of that and consideration of that, because these are, I think that has to do with the fact that these guys are committing suicide, because operation failure is death. That's preached.
Sure.
We don't do this right, we're fucking dead. And then you're failing in your civilian aspects of life. That mentality is intertwined a little bit. It's got to be. And so we got to figure that out, I think. That makes sense. Mm-hmm. You guys are looking at me like batshit crazy.
No, I and we've talked about your plan for it. Somebody needs to think out of the box, and I say this because I have a friend that I deployed with, and I told you a little bit about him. He was a Marine, saw action in Fallujah in Iraq when he was in, and then he did 2 long deployments in that area of operations that I referred to with me, where we were kind of off in the middle of Indian country, and we weren't supposed to be there, the whole 9 yards. But he was away from his wife at the time. They struggled. He had an estranged strained relationship with his daughter, who was young at the time. And he came back, and unbeknownst to me, because I kept deploying, he tried to hang himself in his garage. Local guy. And I remember all I could do at the time was just pray for him and just hope things were going good, because I had my own issues to deal with at the time with my marriage and my children, my young children. And, as it turns out, he stopped deploying and kind of used his GI Bill for education and retraining. And, man, he's doing extremely well right now. Is getting married to the woman of his dreams after he got his divorce with his former wife. His relationship with his daughter is outstanding, and man, that's a success story. But that's rare.
Rare, yeah, super rare.
Yeah, and I hate hearing that. I hate it.
That's what I'm confident my project will change the world for sure.
Sounds like a great project, man. We'll have to talk about that in depth for sure.
Yeah, I've got I know once it's heard about, it'll be welcomed and we'll get it built. There's no doubt in my mind. The cause is too great. It's just, I think, I wish I could just reach the American people, because they just need to be told what's going on. Yeah. And that there is a solution out there.
Well,
I could just address them like I would address my squad going into battle. Yeah. Because it's that serious. It really is.
Well, the recent shooting at the the country Western bar in California.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That was a Marine, and I hate hearing that, because then people wrap their heads around it. Oh, that's the way these guys are when they come back. Well, come on, man. I mean, you can't put them in a box and think that. You gotta.
Yeah, my project's all about getting to the bottom of this,
right.
And
I was just gonna say that just speaks volumes to the lack of health care that we provide in this country for our returning soldiers. So
Well, and it's not a question of the VA doesn't give a shit. The VA's got some great programs, and the
it's a good
VA's
people.
done
it's a
a lot
funding issue,
of
though,
good things.
right?
No,
No?
the funding is there. The problem is first off, we got to wake the fuck up. So the DOD, okay, they're throwing, like, what does it tell you? The Department of Defense had to start a suicide division in 2008, because in between the year of 2004 and 2008, we're talking fucking numbers skyrocketed in suicide. So the Department of Defense collectively we can't fucking ignore this anymore. We got to do something. They've started their anti-suicide campaigns, which is a great campaign. It goes as far as, like, for a squad leader in the National Guard, it was one of my jobs to call my soldiers once a month, in between drills or trainings or whatever, to check in with them. All that stuff's okay, right? And they're dumping a ton of fucking money into it. We're talking billions and billions of dollars. But we're trying to be reactive to this problem. And that's and the American people don't know it, but we are in a reactive state. We are in a defensive position. This is what I would tell them. Like, fuck, if we don't do something, we're going to get overrun. Literally. It's not just the fringes of our veteran community. It's really not. Idaho's even fucking top of the list. We're 36th in the world in suicide. We are a first world country with third world suicide rates. And if this was a battle, I'd tell the American people this: our generals have lost sight of what's going on in the trenches. And we don't have any options. If we stay in this defensive position and keep throwing Band-Aid money, like, it's going to creep up even worse. The problem's only going to get worse. It's gotten worse. We're pulling data now to show that it's gotten worse. So American people, we sit here in this defensive position. Look behind you. There's all the faces of the fucking moms of all those lost warriors, all those heroes. Like, the people that protect our American way of life are murdering themselves at 22 a day. And we're losing 14 civilians a day to self-murder. If we were in any type of conflict anywhere in the world with those type of numbers, that's considered a fucking war to me. We are at war in this country. And if we stand idle and are appeased with what's going on right now and with what our government can facilitate, we will be overrun. Or we can stand the fuck up like we did in World War II. And that's what my project's all about, calling in corporate America to help us, because this is a congressional all-out war against suicide is what they need to call it. We need companies like Johnson & Johnson, that had a housewife invent duct tape in 1943, that ended up saving a ton of lives. These companies that were prideful in their patriotism and stepped in and helped. I mean, everyone in the country made sacrifices. Food was rationed. Metal was given. Kids gave up toys. If we come together as Americans and build this facility, I can cure the problem. Not for everyone, but I can do some fucking serious damage in that percentage, because I know the enemy. I faced him head on. Right? I know his weaknesses, and I want fucking revenge. And that's what the Shot at Dawn Project's all about. It's about saving America's heroes and pulling in that fucking data so we can start using it in our civilian sector too. And I've actually written programs for the Department of Defense, from nutrition, education, financial counseling, and everything that our facility's going to do from day one. You give me a suicidal veteran that's financially collapsed, day one we pull his credit. By the time he leaves there in 2 years, he's going to be a graduate of an entrepreneurship program, business program. He's going to have a minimum of $10,000 in savings. He will have lived in a community where he's supported and had an opportunity to pick up a new hobby like jiu-jitsu, boxing, archery, you name it, art, whatever the counselors think's going to work better for him. And we've taken that guy and we've really fixed every aspect of his life. So now he can go back out in society, the hero that he joined. You know, you give that mom their hero back. Because at one point, that iron-laced, steely-eyed killer had the flag on his shoulder, standing, proud and tall. And that's what I want to give back to this country's
Yeah,
moms.
They just want a new mission. They want
Yeah.
to feel like they belong, and they feel like, and that's awesome. That's a lofty goal, brother.
Yeah, and you know, the Shot at Dawn project's significant too, because 100 years ago, the British Army executed 309 soldiers of its own soldiers. So 100 years later, the reports out of the field were so much towards that these guys weren't just cowardliness and deserters, but they had extreme shell shock. So let's break that down, because that's the first time in history that we dealt with anything like that, and it's from mass explosions, the concussions from explosions.
Yeah, the overpressure.
It affects the nervous system. So now we have a psychological and a nervous system disorder. Well, these new explosions in the last 20 years, these violent EFP explosions and stuff like that, if no one's experienced what that's like, it'll shake your fucking spirit to the core. We have to address that this is a nervous system issue, this is a psychological issue, and this is an issue that involves narcotics, whether it's prescription drugs, alcoholism, and there's layers to it. And until we come together as a people, build a facility like this, and actually start pulling real data, we'll never really get to the bottom of it. This is the only logical step in the country. I'm the only man with the answer in the country, and I'll carry the flag because I know it's going to work. It has to work. It's got to have some pitfalls we'll have to change in it, sure, but it's recovery. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's taking what we know already works and new stuff like diet and nutrition and putting all those concepts together in one spot. And so, fuck, dude, it's going to change a lot of lives. There's no doubt in my mind. And we can, all this stuff, these guys, we can start healing these heroes. And hopefully that those programs I wrote for the DOD, my goal is to have a financial counselor, a family sex and therapist counselor, and a drug and alcohol counselor at unit level, at every unit, at every fucking branch of the service. Now, is that going to cost a lot of money? Indeed. But I asked them in rebuttal, please look at your suicide budget now. Same with my facility. I'm going to get enough money to keep it operational for a couple of years, but it's the reallocation of funding, and we're dealing with the most insured group in the country, and we're spending the most money. It's ungodly in suicide than any other country in the world, our military especially. So the money's there. It's a question of reallocation and dedication, and I'm dedicated to it. I just need the American people to help me reallocate some money, get this project on its feet, and then we can move on to the next one. Because I think this is this facility, if they follow me and help me build this facility, it's not going to win the war, but it sure in the fuck will win the battle and turn the tide of the war against suicide. There's no goddamn doubt in my mind. I just need my message heard so the facility can get out there. And what Andrew's doing in a book like this fits right into a lot of the problems we're going to be dealing with at a facility like this, and that's why I wanted to have him on. They coincide together.
Yeah,
Does that make
totally.
sense? I went off on a tangent.
No, it's
there.
good, man. It's a good project. So I
Yeah,
like
it was really good. How long did it take you to write this book?
So this book initially was an autobiography of my issues and my problems after my wife passed in 2016, or January 2016. And I wrote it as therapy, just because I wanted to get it out there. I wanted to process what happened, what I missed.
Inventory.
Yeah, how I could have, obviously been a factor in that. And, when the organization rejected it is when I spent a couple of weeks feeling sorry for myself until a Navy vet, as a friend of mine who's also a writer, a successful one, said to write fiction. And that's what I was able to push through is fiction. So 3 months, I think, and that was the easy part, man, was just sitting out and just cranking away at the keyboard. The difficulty...
I just want to catch the viewers up real quick. So what he's talking about is due to the security natures of the operations he did, he had to fictionalize characters, names, date, places.
Correct.
But the book is true in the sense of his character doing fictional stuff in a military setting.
Like I said, like a bunch of different guys really
Without saying it,
intertwined in that.
Yeah,
and there's some liberty there to craft a little bit more exciting of a story, because this kind of stuff doesn't happen, as we both know, as often as books and movies like to portray. But when they do, the guys, obviously are on the edge of their seat, and they're operating at full tilt, on all firing on all cylinders, if you will. But an easy write for me. I've already started the second book, which is called Relapse, which delves more into the aftermath. Guys now in the rear. One guy is, which is somewhat based in fact as well. One guy's been captured by the Allied forces in Afghanistan because they misinterpreted his intent, and he's basically being housed in a prison with Taliban and bad guys until they figure out who's done what and get the State Department involved and all that stuff. And that's kind of where the second story called Relapse picks up from that point. And then I'm not going to give away any
Spoiler alert.
spoilers, yeah. But it goes a little bit more into the depths of PTSD and some difficulties at home, dealing with rage. I think a lot of guys have that problem. I know some guys personally that struggle with it. And then, of course, there's a kind of a story that unfolds at home, and then it also takes place some places in the Middle East for the second book. And I will be doing a reading at Jump in Boise on November 27th that talks about some of the ideas that gave me the template for the second book. And so hopefully that's taken only a couple months to get halfway through it, and I'm hoping it's probably going to still be 3 or 4 months, because the difficult part isn't writing it. The difficult part, as you all know, is the post-production, editing, the artwork for the cover, the promotional stuff. That's all the stuff that's not my particular wheelhouse, and I need help with. So kind of drinking from the fire hose in those aspects, but. Yeah, right. I've always been able to write. I can speak a little bit too, but learning new trades.
My reading skills are bad. I can read, I just am not a fan of it.
So that's why you asked for the
I
audio
love
book.
reading.
Yeah. I'll listen to it on. That's what I always
Do you
tell
want me to
people.
read the book and I'll record it for my ASMR?
Well, if
Can I
it's,
get the rights to that?
Yeah, there you go. Maybe I can just record him reading it out loud.
I can just
well, I
read
like
it right here.
I really like the artwork.
Yeah, the artwork was done by a company called Ajima, and the owner of that company is also the founder of a company called Remote Medicine International. And he started. His name is Andrew Cole. He's a great guy. He started that company in his dorm room and then sold it for umpteen millions later on. But they basically provided the world with medevac and medical services and medical training. I'm talking everywhere in the world. So if somebody needed medevac out of Kenya and needed to come home and stuff, they would provide the aircraft and the personnel and the medical equipment to ensure that American citizen could make it back to the United States in one piece. So
that's cool.
Yeah, great guy. He's got a couple projects, and he also trained at one of the facilities that I had the pleasure of learning some medical skills through as well. So lots of people involved in that process. But yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So yeah, if you guys aren't doing anything and you guys want to come by for that reading, it's going to be with a couple other writers, and I think there's even a comedian. They've got music there. It's at Jump. It's called Storytime, and it's a pretty cool little venue in Boise once a month. So
yeah,
right on.
I'd love to go. When is it? Is it the same day every month, like every first Thursday?
It's kind of like around that area. But
who you reading to? Is it kids?
No, it's a PG-13 crowd, so it'll be adults, and you can use profanity. I know some of the subject material is probably a little bit more risque than mine, certainly, but
if you mean for my project?
Do they read their own books? Like
so they don't
they've written, or do they pick a book?
What they do is they'll tell a story, and the story has to be nonfiction. So I took a nonfiction inspiration for my second book, and I'll read that without any notes or anything. I'll just kind of tell the audience what's in my head, and I got 12 minutes to do that. And last I heard, the audience count for last season was 500-600 people.
Whoa.
So it's up there.
Dang.
Yeah.
Dang. Definitely check that out.
That's cool.
Do you repost on social media?
I plan on it. I think they do provide a link, and I think that is obviously
That way I can be reminded.
yeah. Well, I'll get it up there and I'll throw
Yeah.
it up on.
Yeah,
the
throw us an
podcast
invite or
link,
something
too.
like that.
Got
yeah,
it.
That'd be
Yeah,
really
I'd be
cool.
interested in going for sure.
That way, everybody who's listening to this, they can just go to one of our pages, whoever's page.
Yeah.
You know.
You bet.
Do you have an author page too?
I do. Well, the book is under www.afailedstate.com. That's where the hard copy that can be signed for people that are interested in a signed copy is available. And then, of course, like I told you, all the other ebooks are available under the normal sites like Amazon and Barnes & Noble and stuff. But there is an audiobook in the
Thank
works.
God.
Yeah,
That's
so
cool.
because I got guys commuting in Virginia Beach that never read. They're like, hey man, I'll put it on play and I'll be able to weave through traffic and
Yeah.
I can
burn my
read,
day up.
but like, especially you know how it is. We're
I
pretty
love
busy.
reading. I read all the
Oh,
time.
Man, just for me to sit down and read, I'd be like, but
And
I
I-
can
Yeah.
listen. Like I'll go to the gym and I'll listen to
Right?
books and stuff like
Yeah.
that. I love it.
Awesome.
Well, and I like
There's-
to write too, which is why I asked you how long it took you to write that book.
Oh, you're
because-
kind of new to podcasting, right?
That's
this-
my third.
But do you listen?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
you should
no-
check out Dan Carlin's Hardcore History.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Dude, bro, his World War I series will change your life
Awesome.
if you're into that stuff.
No, I am. I love
Yeah.
good stories, as you can tell.
Jeez,
You know,
yeah.
I wouldn't be here. But and on that note, too, Conrad, the first podcast I did is by Mike Schindler, called The Military Wire, and he's had some great authors and some amazing people on. In fact,
Where's he out of?
he's out of Seattle. And he has some, and that's on.
Could you put me in contact
I will.
with him?
Absolutely, because I think you guys would really
Yeah,
hit it
and I'm
off.
gonna do a media tour, and there was another podcast up there I was thinking about.
Yeah, he's
I'd
also
like to get on a couple.
He's also got a company called Operation Military Family, and he's published a couple books. But great guy, same intentions as you, trying to help vets. And he's had some amazing guests on there. The last one was a Army captain who she grew up in a cult. Her parents were in a I don't even know the details, but just a wild story. And then she was able to get out of the cult and get educated and enlist in the Army and kind of make something out of herself. So just
Excellent.
crazy stories, man.
His name's what?
His name's Mike Schindler.
I've heard it.
Yeah, I know you probably have. He's
What's the podcast name?
The Military Wire.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think he might have his thing on military.com.
he actually might have done. There's a pup right there. He might have actually done some military content editing for the History Channel and.
What other podcasts you go on?
I was on a podcast, if you can believe it, called Honest Dad Talk, and it was that's out of Seattle as well, and that's a group of ladies that are active duty military members' wives, and they usually talk about mom stuff, children, mom stuff, and they had me on, and I got a pretty good response. That's where I found out that most of the people that are in the book were female.
We're females.
'Cause
Interesting.
They jumped at it. Yeah.
Cool.
So.
Well, good. Well, we'll have to do another episode. We'd like to build the relationship and bring you back
Yeah,
and
I
go
love
over
you
the
guys. You guys
progress
are
of the
great.
book and
you.
then the idea of the second book. You got anything?
No, this is you were super interesting, and this
Yeah.
I'm excited to read this book. I do have an ebook, so I could probably just snag that, unless I can buy one of these from you.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you want a signed one, I'd be glad to do
Yeah,
that.
I'll take one,
Or you
for
can
sure.
steal Conrad's
I'll
since
get-
he's
I'll
not
get
going
Well, I
to
mean, I
read
don't
his,
mind
right?
You can
supporting
just-
you and just buying a book, man. I
Yeah.
can buy one off you.
Yeah.
I'd love to do that.
Yeah,
So-
I'd love you to read it and give me your opinion.
Totally.
I've sold a bunch of them already, and I've got some good reviews on Amazon, but I can always use more because
Yeah.
that
Okay.
reviews are what make the book really pop. And then, of course, I was invited to speak to some additional families. Conrad touched on this with you at an Air Force base, potentially talking to them about. The families and talking to the families, not the airmen
Yeah.
necessarily. Kind of what to expect and what I guess cascading effects could happen as a result of long deployments and what have you. You know, I'm no expert. I certainly haven't seen as much stuff as some other guys have, but I'm definitely willing to talk about, you know, what befell me and use that as a template to help others. So
Yeah, I think your opinion counts
Yeah.
tremendously too, because you have a different aspect side of it as far as, you know, you're technically federal agent, but you were a civilian compared to the military guys, but same experience, same outcome.
True, because I thought since I had all that civilian experience up until the point where I was working and deployed with this organization that I would be free and clear. But man, I caught, you know, some of the same effects. You know, definitely deep-seated anxiety, had nightmares. You know, saw some stuff, did some stuff, not as much as some other folks did, by any means. But yeah, I think we all, you know, kind of bottle it up inside, and if you don't seek, you know, help for it, some kind of counseling on any level, or you don't, like you said, you don't push yourself into to drugs and alcohol, you know, it comes out and manifests itself physically.
It does, yeah. Cool. You got anything else?
No, that's it.
That
man.
was a good
Yeah,
podcast.
That was an awesome
So,
show.
folks, A Failed State. I don't want to spoil it because we're going to have him back on, and we'll get into depth a little more. But check him out, Andrew Cousins. What's your Instagram?
Instagram is A Failed State Novel with the little underscores there, or my personal is Jury of One, and anybody's free to come on and check it out. There's, you know, it's an open account, so follow me if you'd like.
He likes private messages, ladies. No, I'm just kidding.
And fellows.
No, he's all no.
That'll complicate things a bit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
cool. All right,
Awesome.
well, that wraps it up.
Guys.
We
Yeah.
already did our stuff.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody, and have a wonderful
Grazie.
rest of your day.